This is Jim Sawyer for capitalismincrisis.org. The perspective of this podcast series is this: the way in which the economy behaves changes. However, the way ideologues think it ought to behave stagnates and ossifies. Consequently, doctrinal tweaks are necessary occasionally to realign dysfunctional thinking with the way in which the world actually works. Unbridled doctrinaire thinking on the ideological right especially has been a huge enabler of financial crises. In the run-up to last decade's Great Recession, outrageous ideology fueled speculative real estate deals enabled by lax credit policies and derivative-laced financial frauds by the buckets full. You may have found Michael Lewis's film, The Big Short, as terrifying as it was illuminating. Almost a century earlier, in the run-up to the Great Depression, a Michael Lewis-type film might have focused instead on speculative Florida land deals as notable contributors to that era's bubble economy. It imploded, of course, starting with the stock market crash on Black Friday in the last week of October 1929. Economic carnage notwithstanding, perpetrators of failed ideologies seldom reverse course to accept responsibility for their misguided actions and to disavow their self-interested, crisis-creating roles. Political theorist Antonio Gramsci offered a valuable insight about how to confront paradigm collapse, even collapse involving capitalism, when it occurs. Because he opposed fascists, Gramsci died in one of their prisons in 1937, a Marxist political victim of the government of Il Duce, Benito Mussolini, leader of the Italian fascist state. Gramsci, among his various contributions, argued in order to measure a paradigm's success or failure, one should look first at its ending, not at its beginning. That is, rather than being co-opted to pledge allegiance to whatever a paradigm's claims may be, instead, judge its successes or failures solely on its outcomes, by what it achieves. If one was despondent about capitalism's failures during the 1930s, for instance, then Gramsci would have advised practical reform to replace brokenness with effectiveness. Thus, enter English economist J.M. Keynes. Probably he knew nothing of Gramsci, but the Depression-era reforms he advocated certainly supported Gramsci's practical point of view. Indeed, Keynes was not a radical, but a fixer and a reformer. His self-styled mission was to overhaul capitalism so it could do a better job of gaining standard of living improvements for the masses. Of course, in the United States, it was President Franklin Roosevelt who implemented Keynesian-type ideas. This is how it worked. As sinking financial markets set off waves of panic selling and gold hoarding, the Roosevelt administration set up demand-stimulating programs such as the Works Project Administration, or WPA, and funded them through government bond sales. He argued as the economy grew again, expanding GDP would fuel expanding tax receipts, enabling debt retirement. With households back to work and purchasing again from businesses, eventually growth-creating investments returned to levels not seen since before the bubble economy's collapse. With that, of course, living standards grew again and new labor force entrants were not only tolerated, but enthusiastically received. Keynes was tasked with cleaning up the doctrinal roadmap's errors that triggered the dysfunctional bubble economies of the 1920s in the first place. Without that, including a new roadmap for how to dig out of future economic messes, capitalism's unrectified problems would again hobble new generations of business people and government policymakers, schooled in the old ideas and the old ways. Essentially, Keynes rejected Say's law. Practically, this meant the real world is not orderly in the sense of physicist Isaac Newton. Therefore, the amount households plan to save may exceed the amount businesses plan to invest. Oversaving and underconsumption, of course, had been Depression-era symptoms for collapsing demand, rising unemployment, and tanking lifestyles. Consequently, government's role in the standard paradigm patch since then has expanded to embrace economic security. This restarts capitalism's engines until normalcy returns, as it did in the 1950s. That also was a time of significant revising by the writers of university economics textbooks. But wait, if Say's law is a doctrinal glitch, it is not the only glitch. Another exists, the so-called profit lacuna, which has become a huge contributor to American-style corporate capitalism's many failures. How does it get fixed? Indeed, where is Keynes when we need him again? Well, unfortunately, there was only one J.M. Keynes. But is it possible to act successfully now in a manner consistent with Keynes and with Gramsci and their worldviews? I certainly believe it is. Stay tuned. That fix is now within our gun sights, so to speak, and next on our agenda. From Boulder, Colorado, this is Jim Sawyer for CapitalismInCrisis.org.